We're going to tie a latex scud. We begin by laying down a foundation of white thread on our hook. The hook we're using is a Tamco 3761 in a size 16. The thread we're using is Scud broad 10/0 in white. We're going to take this thread and wrap it back to the bend of the hook, laying down a foundation of white thread that we can lay the rest of our materials on. I like using this white Scud broad thread because it lays down really fast, flat, and is really strong. You'll see that we're wrapping back to the bend of the hook. The bend of the hook is actually going to be the head of our fly. I've got some coq de leon fibers in light, and what this is the tip of the feather, but normally usually I would take about 30 fibers and stack them in a stacker and tie them into the bend of the hook. And I like the tip to go to just about the bottom or a little bit further down below the base of the hook. I'm going to tie in the coq de leon fibers about halfway back to the shaft and then trim. The reason that is so that I have some bulk and I get a little bit of a larger head on my fly and to create a taper to the back. You'll see as we develop this. I'm just laying down and tying in the coq de leon fibers so that they stay. I've taken some 17-pound clear monofilament and burnt my eyes, and I'm tying it in with a figure 8. This is just at the tie-in point where I tied in my coq de leon fibers. And this is a figure 8, and just wrapping the eyes firmly to the hook. Now I've taken a piece of large clear D-rib and I've cut a little at an angle so I don't build up the bulk of the D-rib, and I'm tying it in at the front. You'll note that all my wraps are at one end of the D-rib because I'm going to take my blade later and trim the back end of it from behind the eye of the hook. Now I'm really tying this in really well, right back behind the eyes, and getting a good solid foundation there. Now I'm going to take my blade and trim right behind the eye of the hook, and you need a sharp blade for this, and just push it towards what would be the front end of the fly. And you'll see a nice taper after I make this cut. The D-rib cuts fairly well. If it isn't, it's because it's older stuff, but it should. You just use a sharp blade and just push, and you see how that nice taper happens? Now I'm going to take my thread and wrap the D-rib to the top of the hook. You'll see I keep on adjusting it. The D-rib has a tendency to drift away from you as you complete your wraps. Now I'm going to take it and bring it back all the way back to behind the eye of the hook, and once again lay a nice foundation of thread as I attach the D-rib to the hook. Now what I have is I've taken a piece of latex. You can use nymph skin, or what I have here is a strip of latex that I've gotten from a surgical glove, and I've cut it at an angle, and I am tying in right behind the eye of the hook. Now I'm going to take my thread and bring it up to the front of the fly, or to the eyes, so that I can wrap my latex to the back. Now nymph skin in about a size 8 width, or even a 1/4 inch on the bigger flies, but just the 1/8 inch you can wrap it. Now I like this stuff because it's really thick, and it enhances the segmentation on the fly. And I'm overlapping by about half. You'll note that I'm not pulling it real tight, so I'm not stretching it. I like that segmentation. Bring it up to the head of the hook, and I'll tie it off right back behind the eyes. You can see right now already you have really what I call a profile of a swimming scud. If you've ever seen a scud, they're stretched out when they're swimming. They're not curled up as most people think, or most people tie their scuds. Now I'm just laying down quite a bit of wraps. I just really want to tie off my latex thread. Also, I'm laying down a foundation for my ostrich herl where I'm going to tie it in at. I've trimmed my latex, and I'm going to take a Sharpie, black Sharpie, and color my eyes. Now I have a tendency to wipe off my eyes and wipe off the black, so don't be embarrassed. Go back in and put marker on there more often just to color those eyes. What happens is that black sits up on the top on the eyes, and then later on you'll see we'll put a coating of UV knot scents, and it gives a depth to the eyes. And they're cheap eyes, I mean monofilament, fairly inexpensive. What I have now is I am going to take a dark olive chart pack marker and color the top of my fly. If you'll notice on a real Scud that the fly is actually darker on the top of it and then get gradually lighter as it comes down the sides. And you'll note, you can see how the pigment within the marker gathers on the ridges of the latex and giving it that pronounced segmented effect. I really like the look of this. And now I'm going to take after this I'm going to take a lighter olive and pull that dark pigment and pull it down to the sides. And what I think what happens is, as this fly goes through the water, it sees the dark, and as it rolls, you get that lighter colored and it flashes. And I think that's a triggering effect. Now, I've taken some ostrich, 3 strands of ostrich herl, and I am going to tie it in by the tips. This is just giving a look. Now you really want to tie this ostrich in here really well, because what happens is you're going to twist this ostrich herl and it has a tendency to pull out. So I take a little bit more time and tie in this ostrich herl so that it doesn't get away from me. I hate pull. That's the one thing that bothers me. I hate it when I always pull that out. So I'll wrap it really, really well. And I'm going to trim off the excess tips of the ostrich herl. Now what I'm going to do to attach my legs to my Scud is what is known as a Potts weave. I actually saw it done by another tire, Tucker. I saw his Tucker Scud, and I used the same technique. I was looking for a way to attach my legs to the bottom of a fly without having to wrap it all the way around. And I saw this, and I found out later that it's called a Potts weave. Now I'm going to take my ostrich herl and take my hackle wrap tool and twist my hackle pliers and twist my ostrich herl together. And what it does is it flares out the different little filaments of the ostrich herl and makes it really bushy. Now some guys don't like that bushy legs, so what I do is you can just use 2 or mix a couple colors. Now you'll see I'll take the thread and let it come down about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, gather it, and then pull my thread up over the top, and making sure my ostrich herl stays down below. Once again, I'll wrap around with my white thread about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch and wrap it around, and then pull my white thread up over the top in between the segments of the fly. And what it does is it makes all of my ostrich herl stay underneath the fly. Now you'll see I'll have to twist some more and more as I go on. Also, some of the filaments have a tendency to get trapped underneath there, so I'm just taking a bodkin and pulling them out. And once again, about 1/8, 1/4 of an inch down below, pulling it up and over the top of, pulling my thread up and over the top of the Scud. And I'll work that to the back of the fly. And it really, if you look at a Scud, a real Scud, when it's swimming through the water, all of its movement is in those legs. Those legs are just going like crazy. And so I think that this ostrich herl, as it goes through the water, it's being stripped through the water, or flows through the water, it's getting all that movement, and that's what's happening. So you might also try taking 2 different colors, like tan and olive, or tan and brown, and using that as the legs. You get a really nice effect. I've also used UV iced up in a brush along with ostrich herl as the legs. Now I'm working to the back of my fly. Once again, just wrap it about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, and then pull my thread up over the top. Now I'm about to trim off my oyster trail. This is where I got to be a little careful. I have a tendency to trim off my thread. Now I'm going to take my whip finisher and just tie off my thread and then trim it. Basically, the scud is done right now. And after we do the whip finish, we're going to take the legs and push them more underneath the body of the fly. Now, as you push down, you're going to see some of this oyster trail sitting up high. You want to push that down or even trim it off if it annoys you, because what happens is when we put a coating of UV knot scents, if there are any hairs that are up or sticking up, what happens is the UV knot scents doesn't flow properly, so it makes it really rough. And so I'll take a little saliva and I'll push the legs down and push them down, and I get real picky here because this is where I get the real effect. If you look at that, see how that oyster trail drops just down below the tip of the hook? Here, once again, I'm just taking more of that oyster trail and I'm pushing it down so it sits underneath the scud. You can see some of those fibers. I'm just taking a bit more saliva and pushing it down. Now I'm going to take my UV knot scents. Now I love this stuff. It dries or cures very quickly with UV light, about 30 seconds with the light that I have, or out in the sunlight, or one of those battery powered ones. Now I like the UV knot scents also because it flows so well, and as you look at this, what it does is it gives depth to the fly, and it also gets a little shiny depending on how the light hits it. Now every once in a while I'll put too much UV knot scents, and I'll have it thick in some places and thinner in others. And what I do is I take my thumb, press it into the areas that I want it to go into, and at the same time I'm pulling some of the excess UV knot scents, and then it also flows back in to the areas so it's smooth. This is my UV light. It's actually a dental curing light. Doesn't take very long. Sunlight works really well too, as well as the battery operated UV lights. You also might try getting one of those UV nail lights for curing ladies' nails. Those work also really well. You can see this is basically my basic scud. I also do this in orange. I'll take a cadmium orange on the top and then a lighter orange, and once again pull the color down onto the sides of the scud, and then I use ginger oyster trail for the legs. That's my basic latex scud.